We are the Keyboard Samurai, a podcast focused on sharing insights to help those working in cybersecurity companies, be them technology or services. Each session, your host, Will Klusovsky, aka Will Clue, sits down with professionals in our industry to illuminate topics that will help your security biz, team, or self be better. Let's hack into it now. Hey everybody, welcome back. Will here. Excited today. Get to bring in a former colleague of mine who I've worked with. Super GRC guy. So I get to talk about one of the, everybody knows I know a whole little about a lot of things. But I guess if there was one thing I know more about, it is kind of GRC and strategy stuff. So it's cool to be in a little more of my wheelhouse today. So Tom, give us 20, 30 seconds of who you are and why we care.
Sure, yeah. My name is Tom Richards. I'll say you shouldn't really care, but what gives me some credence here is that I am actively a GRC and strategy consultant for a company called Stratascale. I help a lot of very large organizations, kind of Fortune 1000, to set up security programs, set up governance programs. I got into this space. I have a storied past in security. I started in the SOC like so many people, worked my way up, spent time into threat intelligence, started a business, did that whole thing. And through the course of that work, spent some time in ransomware negotiations, which I absolutely could not stand. The hours were terrible. And I said, hey, you know what? Instead of helping people fix problems after the fact, I'm going to move to GRC and try to get on the front end, the strategy end. So that's what brought me to where I am. Nice. Got a little gray in the beard to show for it.
Yeah. I remember telling the story about all the negotiation stuff, and it's like, oh, I can imagine. We won't go down that painful past for you.
Maybe another time.
Let's talk about the fun stuff. So I guess as we think about like, those of us working on the service delivery side, and how, working with the types of clients you are, regardless of the types of clients, I think any client side, like what are some of the things that you think are good for other GRC professionals, other people running security firms to know about kind of getting into, maybe starting to deliver GRC services or making their GRC services a little better? Like, I'm sure you got a couple of tidbits of knowledge you can share, like, hey, this is really going to help you like save time, money, effort, whatever.
Yeah, exactly. It's for GRC, it's about getting ahead of stuff. It's about being proactive. It's about really being strategic. So something just right out of the gate, maybe this is common sense, but realize in a service industry, you're talking to clients and the clients are people. So, and I can say from experience, looking back on myself, when I was a diehard like SOC guy working on IPS and firewalls, security was the only thing that mattered. Being as secure as possible was the most important tidbit. But that's not realistic and it's not feasible. Maybe in a world where you have infinite time, money, and other resources, but that's not the case. So you gotta put that first and foremost. So realize with any client, with any engagement, there's going to be compromises, and you might have an idea of what the perfect outcome is. The client might have share in that perspective, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's realistic. So
yeah, their budget, that budget may not be that. It doesn't matter if the CISO wants to do that, if the budget's not there, right? Like as an example.
Yes. And we have a formal process where I work, but there's also the informalities of there's always going to be like some sort of change in scope, blah, 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 blah. So that's sort of my general just consulting advice.
Well, I think it's super important. And I think I've talked about it a few times with other people. It's interesting because I have the same, I don't know if it's opinion or perspective or just form of experience, but you get the folks who are kind of, in the dungeon, hands on keyboard all day. And those are the ones that when we talk about like products and services, like even, well, this thing does this thing better. This light blinks brighter, so I want it. And like being able to say, but the CISO or the CEO or the COO, they don't care because I'm not going to spend $1 million to make your life 15 minutes easier, right?
Yeah, exactly. And so, I mean, you just introduced a great concept there, return on investment. And again, when you're focused on a threat-based approach, specifically about threats and stopping threats, then you are going to want to maximize your security controls. It's not necessarily a bad thing. But like I said, it's just not always realistic. And so you can burn yourself out having that mentality. And you got to remember too, that security is this very ambiguous magic cloud to most folks, right? When I think of it in a very sort of tangible, structured way, like the OSI model pops into my head, and then I assign an appliance or a control to that layer. And so I can line all these things up. But that comes from real intimate experience at all those things. An executive or even a lot of times a manager in something like governance, risk, compliance, they don't have hands-on experience with those things. And so why are they going to know what like packet inspection is? And to your point, like, oh, this light is a better color. That's all well and good, but playing on that analogy, if your board is colorblind, it doesn't matter. So
I'm going to steal that. I'll credit you for it. When I use
Thank you. Yes.
Well, let's talk about that, because I love that you said threat-based approach. And as somebody who's doing, like, I'm building security programs right now.
Yeah.
Like, what is like there's a lot of organizations, I think, and I make this recommendation too, for even like MSPs, smaller, large, no matter how they are, to get into security and start building some of that revenue. Like GRC is sort of the easy path, because you can start with compliance, which is kind of like, do you do this? Yes or no.
Yeah.
But like looking to build more value would be having a threat-based approach, or even some type of relative risk assessment. Like, how do you, like when I say things like threat modeling or using threat, like how do you suggest that stuff gets implemented, and what's kind of the better ways to do that?
Right. So for anyone who's maybe not familiar with the some of the things you just said, I want to call out just 3 bullet points: threat-based, risk-based, or maybe compliance-based. And those aren't necessarily formalized, and there's some nuance to them. So like, what does it all mean? Blah, blah, blah. We can talk about that a little bit later. But what I really want to say, and how I want to answer the question, is just to say, when you're coming in as an outsider, you have to understand the culture of the organization. That culture is definitely going to be there, whether or not the client recognizes their approach is something that you need to suss out. And the reason I say that is because they might think they're doing it one way, but in actuality, they're doing it another. So you also have to realize it for yourself, because that might include some sort of realignment. I'm using all these soft words: re-education, you don't correction.
Have to be too soft. I always say there's 3 ways it's done: the way that it's documented, the way that management thinks it happens, and the way it actually does.
Right. Yeah. And so identifying how it actually happens versus how people are telling you it happens and stuff like that, that's very, very important. So now, just going back to the top, like, you can take a threat-based approach, which is said in just simple terms. Okay, what are we seeing? What's hitting us? And then how do we block it? Right. That's certainly one way. It's not the approach that I would prioritize, that I would kind of start with. You can take the risk-based approach, which is similar, but it's earlier in the pipeline, the sort of shift left, if you will, because instead of looking at what's hitting you, you're looking at what could hit you or why.
Right.
And then threat intelligence is great there, or reviewing your monitoring and stuff like that. If you go with a risk-based approach, you're pushing it even further back and you're saying, okay, risk-based approach, where are we vulnerable? Where are the risks, right? Risks are just threats that haven't sort of happened yet.
Right. I'd say the risk is like the what if, and then the threat is like where or how, based on
or how, or what now. Yeah. So what if versus what now. But then really what I advocate, and you touched on this with risk assessments and stuff like that, is I don't know, for lack of a better term, I'll just call it like a strategic based approach or an outcome based approach. And that's putting security aside first. Just, and again, because it is so fuzzy to so many people.
Fugazi.
Yeah. Fugazi. Just take it out for a minute, and I like to sit down with an organization and be like, okay, I think I understand what you do, right? You're a financial institution, you're a manufacturer. I think I understand what's important to you, and I'll lead in with, you make this, and so maybe your plans and your supply chain is valuable to you. You got to validate that. You got to let them kind of say it. So not only they tell you, but they hear themselves say it, and they admit it. And then you talk about the implications, because that, I think when you do that, it allows the person to see the costs of not doing something,
Sure.
right? Which is extremely hard to measure when something doesn't happen. And I think security people by and large are just naturally paranoid or concerned about the bad things. Like, I'm always looking over my shoulder because of my job and because of my personality type.
Right.
But that was just a really long way to say, I restart the conversation and just focus on really what's important to the business and why cybersecurity even matters, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Simplest example. Go ahead.
Yeah. And what you said, I think is perfect. And meaning like, you have to come in and understand the business, right? You can't come in and say, you have to do these things because it's security. It's like, no.
Right.
And this is where, like, I think, like, I love a risk-based approach, but I'm also very, very much aware of how much those numbers are, no matter what formulas you have, most companies don't have the maturity to give you the data you need to accurately say, well, if this goes down, you're losing X amount of dollars per minute, hour, month. Like,
right.
Most of the time you can kind of figure that out. If there's some, like with manufacturing is a good example. Well, they know if that machine goes down, there's data there to say it. But if you have a website that's hosted, or you have a web application that's one of 50 other web applications you have, and all of these different things contribute to your revenue, like being able to say, that's a lot harder. So that's where that's kind of why I asked, like, from I say relative risk, because I like to look at it and be like, well,
there you go.
What's important to the business? Like, you've got 70 applications. Which ones matter the most, and what would happen if those go down? Right. And then I love what you said too about make them say it. That's a great thing for sales too, for those whoever listening on the sale. Like, that's actually where I got it. Like, it's not just like if it's their idea, it's better, but getting like that's like a psychological thing. Saying the thing out loud that's like bothering you inside, like that's it's a great way to go.
Yeah, like you say it out loud, and then that's the first step into making it less like intimidating, less scary, because sometimes you just got to say it out loud to another person, and then you're already putting yourself in a position of being vulnerable. You're not really that vulnerable, but kind of feels that way, and you got over the first hump. So I think it's called labeling. Good on you. Labeling.
I think that's what I follow Josh Braun, and he always talks about, I think, Chris Voss. They're all like salespeople, but it's super interesting because it's all there's so much psychology into it, and I think that's what he calls it, label. Like, once you name something and recognize this is the problem, or this is in their case, what's the barrier to purchase or whatever. But like, this is the problem that we're dealing with. Let's give it a name.
Yeah. And then you establish a term and it's got the identifier. It becomes a little bit, you start working towards making it more tangible, more consumable or whatever.
Let me ask you this, because while we all know, again, I think GRC is a great place to basically just make some money from a services standpoint. But there's a lot, especially like, the Fortune 1000, we get it. They need a policy for everything.
And they're very heavily compliance based and
right,
compliance
they're
driven, at least
because compliance. The lower you get down in the market, there's still people who want to be secure and want to do the right things, but also maybe they don't feel like they need to write every single process down and get somebody to sign off of it and say, like, how do you weigh that balance and being like I right now I'm using this CSF and that whole governance frame, like the whole governance section. A lot of it is all very important, but some of it is just like, well, yeah, we do that. Like, how much of that is okay versus like, no, we need to have it on paper because yes or no, you're gonna be like, where do you sit on that kind of stuff?
I am very much the type of person who is like, my natural inclination is to try to make something like overly engineered and too perfect, right? I'm sure you have this too. I know you have this because we've sat down and talked about it, but like, the time blindness kicks in and all of a sudden it's 3 a.m. and I'm like, nose to the monitor. And I just want everything just so. But that's not realistic. And again, thinking about the state of the business, thinking about all the constraints, recognizing that reality, you have to be okay with compromise. And in the situation that you're talking about, which NIST CSF is a great model, it's very consumable. But then it's the next step, right? That there's 100 some odd controls, but it's not a pass fail.
Yeah, it's not prescriptive by any means.
Exactly. It's not a pass fail. It's not prescriptive. And it's a self-assessment. So you can rate yourself on a spectrum, right? The CMMI 0 through 5 or whatever is a great methodology for that. Excuse me. It's a great methodology for that because it puts accomplishments to a number, right? And then you can say, okay, you have such and such control in place, but it's only a 2 out of 5 or something like that, right? But now you have something that you can actually talk about directly, rather than say, okay, we have it. What does we have it mean? We have it is not measured. It's a subjective opinion.
Right. It exists or it doesn't.
Right. Yes. But like how much do you have? Do you have it written down? Do you have it part of a process? Do you have it automated? Right. Those are the different scores you'll get through that process. But doing a risk assessment is a great service because it gives you a big lay of the land, right? And once you have all those controls, you can take that step back and you can look at it more as like categories, right? And then if you look at it one control at a time, you're gonna end up with potentially 108 bespoke tools
policies.
for all your controls or policies or whatever. Yeah, but like, you can check off a lot of boxes when you take that step back, whether that's an actual security control or a policy or a procedure, a document, whatever. So that's another way to then measure where you are and then determine how much effort it's going to take to get where you need to be. And that need should be defined by some sort of strategic motivation, whether that is, okay, we want to get a federal contract with the US government, so we need CMMC, right? Now we know what it's going to take us to actually do that.
Right.
And you can talk to somebody who can help you budget that out, talk about, how long some of these projects will take, and then you break it down and good consulting practices, present a good, better, best
Mm-hmm.
to the client.
Love that.
But you gotta also let them know, okay, good is good, but it's everywhere. It's like the combos at the movie theater. Oh, for 25 cents more, you can get
It's only
an
this
extra.
much more to be this much better. Or
Yeah.
the comparison was the one right there. Like in your industry, you're here and everybody else is here. Like you
Right.
can get to the minimum or you can go a little better.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
That
And
I was gonna say oh, go ahead there. Sorry.
well, I'll just add, but it's up to you as a consultant to not just show what security benefits there are, right? And what that could save you. Again, that's very hard to measure. You can talk about previous breaches and costs of previous breaches. But I just like to spin it to the positive. It's not even spin. I just like to look at it from a more positive perspective. Like, what will like enhancing your security posture allow you to do as a business, right? And if it's really done properly with some good automation and stuff like that, there's opportunity costs in freeing up some man time. One of the things I did recently for a client was just automate some reports that they needed. I can't talk too much about it, but
Sure.
it was really straightforward thing. But they had reports. A human being was outputting in Excel, sending it to another human being. That human being was processing all this data in Excel. Then it was going to a third person. And I said, okay, well, I see what the report needs to look like. And then we can get this Excel and we just dump it into a folder and Power BI does its magic. But I just freed up, I don't know how many hours of work across 3 different people every month. Right. So, but it's your job to present those opportunities. And some of those could be business opportunities. Like, okay, to your point, if you meet the industry kind of baseline, then you're going to be able to show that. And in the climate, that's going to increase their clients' confidence, their customers' confidence. So
Yeah,
just stuff to think about.
I had a client, and ever since I learned of this from them, I've kind of used it as a good example for kind of the benchmarking, which was at a client whose entire reason basically for security was to be legally defensible.
Yeah.
And what they would do is the industry.
Can we just pause for a moment of silence to all the viewers who may have passed out and died from that comment? Sorry.
No, it's great. It's perfect. It's the GRC chat. We knew we were going to talk about legal at some point.
Yeah, it has to happen.
No, but they had like I won't get details, but like they were in one industry, and so what they did is they judged themselves based on another industry, an industry that was more regulated, and their goal was to be independently third-party verified, to be more mature than people in this highly regulated industry. Because at the end of the day, if something happened and they were going to get fined or taken to court, they could go on paper and be like, look, man, we did our due diligence and then some. And I think that's a great way, because no matter what size you are, I think the smaller you get, kind of the more that approach, you're less likely to need to sort of go to Congress, I think, if you're an SMB. But on the other hand, though, like one breach can put you out of business. So like you can kind of use that same sort of methodology to kind of quantify things a little without going into the likelihood times SLE, ARO, all of that stuff.
All those numbers.
People just fell asleep again. So,
I'll just add to that. Excuse me. I'll just add to that. A nasty little secret is that sometimes security vendors are brought in just to create degrees of separation between the client and liability, right? In a way. Yeah. Read the contracts, folks. Like, and it's the same, like insurance and legal are in the same boat, Oh, well, we have we're insured for that. If in case that happens,
Yeah.
we're covered, right? That's really how people should. Well, you got to look out. You got to look out for that. I've walked into
it's a
plenty of
method.
situations.
Let's put it that way. It's one way. Yeah, like there's always a reason to do the right things, right?
Yes,
more
absolutely.
than just them being the right thing. So, Tom, I could go and bore everybody else to death even more, but we're
keeping it tight.
Yeah, we'll keep it tight. Where can anybody find you on the interwebs should they want to?
You might be able to find me on LinkedIn. I think I'm open there. I don't really keep much of an online presence, but if you're watching this and you want to get in touch with me, feel free to also reach out to Will. He can give you my contact info.
Yeah, sure.
I'm always open for a conversation. I do a lot of advising and stuff even though I work where I work and what I do, I do a lot of advising for folks across different sectors and company sizes. So
yeah, pretty common for those of us in this industry. Like, you have to. There's a lot of giving back in the industry. That's one thing I can say. So
yeah, exactly. And I like just making the relationships and helping folks out because it's fun to solve the problems.
It's the whole reason this is even happening. It's like this. I was like, this isn't that hard. I'm gonna just talk to get my friends on here and we'll talk about stuff. So thanks, man, so much. It was great chatting with you, Tom.
My pleasure. Take care.
Thanks for enjoying Keyboard Samurai Podcast. If you'd like to engage, find Will on LinkedIn at /WillClue or visit at willclue.me. That's WILKLU.me for more info. Disconnecting now. Synac you later.